talking a little bit about sensing touch. Victor talked yesterday about how our periphery senses temperature, and the system that our body uses for sensing touch on a broad scale looks pretty similar. But there are a few slight differences that we're going to talk about a little bit today. As you guys have questions, just be sure to pipe up, ask me, interrupt me. This is your chance to talk to scientists about what they do. So the first thing I wanted to do is just, let's see, this is not plugged in. So if I want to get it to go, I gotta plug it in first. Imagine that. Okay, so I put a picture of a few animals up here. Do you guys all recognize these animals, or are there some up here that you don't recognize? Yeah, we got a platypus right here. We got a mole. This is a naked mole rat. How about this one? This one's a little tricky. I think I heard someone say it. Duck? Yeah, this is a duck. Great. I'm just giving you guys a hard time. But how about this guy? Yeah, anybody know this guy? It's a star-nosed mole, exactly. So you guys know all these different animals. Why did I put them all up on a slide together? What do they all have in common? These guys have, well, someone got it. These guys live in the water, but I heard someone say touch, which is a pretty good guess considering the title that I had on the previous slide. But yeah, so these guys are all kind of champions of touch sensation. So as scientists, when we want to study a specific topic, it can be really useful to study the organisms that really exaggerate this topic. The star-nosed mole, its star organ is extremely touch sensitive. It has about 10 times as many nerve endings in that little teeny star organ as our fingertip does. The naked mole rat, it's hard to see, but it's got these whiskers here that are also extremely sensitive to deflections. And that's really important because the naked mole rat goes through tunnels. It's an animal that burrows underground, and it uses these hairs to kind of orient itself in the tunnel. You can see those little kind of pathetic eyes that it's got there. It's mostly using those body whiskers to orient itself in the tunnels. Its incisors are also really touch sensitive. So for digging and stuff like that, it's important to have those. And I mean, fighting other naked mole rats, these are its kind of its swords. So it needs to be very touch sensitive. Platypus and duck kind of have similar kind of uses for this touch sensitivity, where they have a bunch of these touch sensitive neurons that are in their bill and that they use in order to forage for very, very specific types of food. The platypus has all kinds of weird sensation going on. So if you're curious about the platypus, ask me afterwards. I don't think I have time to go into it now, but platypi are weird. Okay, so you don't think of it, but here's a behavior that's very typical of a duck. It's sped up a little bit, but you can see that the ducks, they're not really looking, they're just doing this motion, this behavior that's called dabbling in order to find food in murky water. And this behavior facilitates activating those touch-sensitive neurons so that it can find very specific types of vegetation to eat. Before I move on, we talked broadly about, temperature sensation, hot, cold, pain. I want to brainstorm a little bit about touch sensation because we kind of lump touch into temperature, heat, cold, all kinds of stuff. But I just want you guys to think about what is touch really? What constitutes touch? It's a very broad sense. Yeah. All right.
I know it has a lot to do with the peripheral system and I guess mechanoreceptors.
Yeah, exactly. So mechanoreceptors are the names of those cells in the periphery that sense touch. Yeah. But there are a lot of different types of mechanoreceptors. Why do you think there might be a lot of different types of mechanoreceptors? Yeah, Arya.
For different functions, I guess.
Yeah, so David, what kind of different functions might you need for touch? Yeah, so heat is a different type of like, physical sensation that you can feel. How about like the way that your cell phone vibrates versus like a pinch or something like that, right? Like those are very different modalities. The way that this wood feels, the way that you detect the grain of that wood is very different from the feel of somebody holding your hand, right? Those are all very different types of, and also pain, right? Like a puncturing feeling is really different than the feeling of like, a cat licking you or something like that, right? So these are all really different types of physical stimuli that we need different tools in order to interpret, so we can know the difference between pricking a cactus and annoying cats. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this schematic that Victor showed yesterday. And so the important thing to see here is kind of the pathway, where you have these different types of neurons that are responsible for sensing different types of touch. You have some neurons that innervate hair follicles. They're really good at like, feeling the breeze on your body or something like that, right? And some of these neurons that end in the skin. Some of them freely innervate the skin. Those are the ones that are really good at sensing pain, like anything from like a cactus prick to like a pinch. And you also have some that innervate special skin cells. And when I say innervate, it's just where it ends up. They end on these special skin cells. And all these neurons take this information from the periphery, from the outside of our body, and they bring it back to the spine. And this schematic here, what this is trying to say, so you can see this little square back here, right? It's kind of cut like it's just straight down here. It's a cross section. So this is what this cross section of your spine looks like. These neurons that come from the periphery, they come all the way to your spine, and then they communicate to other neurons to take that information up to the brain. And like I was saying, there are a bunch of different types of mechanoreceptors, or these touch-sensitive neurons, because there are so many different types of touch that we experience on a day-to-day basis. Our hands are kind of the primary way that we interact with the world. So anything from that cat that I was talking about, you have special types of nerves that innervate these skin cells that allow you to feel that kind of texture. You have special nerves that end deeper in your skin that are really good at sensing vibrational stimuli, versus soft touch or something painful like the cactus or like a scrape or something like that. So you need all of these different types of touch receptors in the skin in order to decode this complex mix of stimuli that is touch. One other kind of interesting thing about touch, there are just a lot of layers of complexity with this thing. There are lots of different types of neurons, but depending on the type of skin that you're in, you can also have a different density of those receptors. And so what I'm looking to illustrate here is that here you have all of your different neurons that are responsible for sensing touch in the skin. And the area in which they sense touch is overlapping, right? And this helps you give spatial acuity to where you're experiencing touch. Are you sensing it here? Are you sensing it here? Are you sensing it here? And so this, like I said, this allows spatial acuity. So if you feel 2 points of touch, you can know that it's occurring at different places. This spot that one single sensory neuron senses is called a receptive field. Okay? So if you have 2 distinct points that are far away from each other, you can sense them distinctly. Whereas if you have 2 points that are really, really close to each other, you might not be able to sense them distinctly. You might not be able to do that. So that being said, imagine you didn't have smaller receptive fields like this. Imagine that your nerves had bigger receptive fields. Do you think that you'd be able to have more spatial acuity, or do you think you'd have less spatial acuity? So like, instead of those smaller ones, what if your receptive fields were like this versus, this? would the small or the large receptive fields allow for more spatial acuity? So, exactly. You guys got it. Yeah. So why would the small ones allow for more spatial acuity?
Because then you can know like the exact point you were touched.
Yes, it allows you to know the exact point you were touched. Imagine that you received two touch stimuli. One right here and one right here. With the large receptive fields, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. You'd only be activating this neuron. Whereas with the smaller receptive fields, you'd be activating two different neurons. So this is another layer of these touch-sensitive neurons that allow us to encode this mix of physical stimuli that we're experiencing every single day. So moving on, some of these, I was telling you about these diversity of different mechanoreceptors that you have. They all have different receptive field sizes. So some of them, like the vibration ones, have really big receptive fields. That's because if you're feeling vibration, the acuity isn't necessarily as important, right? Like if you're feeling your phone vibrating in your pocket or something like that, you know, the exact location of that vibration isn't quite as important. Whereas something like fine touch, if we're really trying to, you know, hold a pencil or something like that, being able to correctly hold a pencil in place requires knowing what different points of contact you have there. Yeah.
The lettering that's underneath each of those diagrams, like A, B, or is that like that?
So that's a good question. I wasn't going to get into that, but these are different flavors of neuron. So I don't know if in other classes you've learned more extensively about neurons, but in order for that electrical signal to flow and to flow quickly, it's helpful to have insulation on those neurons. And that insulation is called myelin. It's kind of like a kind of fatty, it's a bunch of cells that are kind of wrapped around so that you don't get leak of electricity along the path of the axon. And so that lettering corresponds to some of them being myelinated, which are those little bubbles that you see in different types of myelination, versus these guys, they don't have any myelin. So the message actually travels a lot slower. So yeah, there's just another layer of complexity. But the main story here is to just remember that you have all these different types of sensory neurons that are in your skin everywhere. That single cell will reach, you know, out of your toes and into your spine. You know, these cells, in my case, you know, they can be like, you know, 3 feet long or something like that, 3.5 feet long. It's nuts. And then they take this information up to the brain, and they take this information to a special part of the brain called the somatosensory cortex. Have you guys heard of the somatosensory cortex before? So some of you are nodding your heads, some of you are shaking your heads. I hadn't heard of this place until college, so that's absolutely fine. But the somatosensory cortex is where your brain receives that sensory input. It's where it kind of processes that sensory input. And so you have different parts of this brain that process different information, all the way from your tongue, your nose, your eye, down to your trunk, your hand, your feet, genitals, so, you know, all around your body. And you can see that, you know, for the size of brain, this isn't proportional to the size of body, right? Why do you think that is? Why isn't this proportional? Why does my face make up almost 1/3 of this? Whereas my face is only, you know, it's not 1/3 of my body. That'd be pretty crazy, but
The face is more complex.
It has
the eyes and the nose, so it requires more work.
So it requires more work. Why would it require more work? Why do we need to focus on our eyes more and stuff like that?
Because like most of the senses are like on your face, you have your ears, nose, mouth.
Yeah, so our nose, our lips, our tongue, our eyes, they're all touch sensitive, right? They're all pretty sensitive compared to, you know, like your forearm or something like that. Why do you think that is?
I have a question. This doesn't say anything about the ears.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Well, 'cause I guess
Well,
they have.
Whoops. Yeah, this doesn't have ears on it, does it? Weird. Huh.
They're not very sensitive.
They're not super sensitive, no. It's easier to pierce your ear than it is to pierce your lip. But yeah, that's a good point. We'll think about that. But one way of representing of this is a sensory homunculus. Have you guys heard of the sensory homunculus? Yeah, this dude, so it's a human drawn proportional to the senses that you're feeling. So what do you guys notice here?
The hands are huge.
The hands are huge. Why are the hands huge?
They have the most.
Right, so why would hands be so touch sensitive?
Because we use them for like coordination of like holding things and
Exactly. We're using the hands to interact with our environment every single day. I can't think of a day that I've gone not using my hands. But what else do you guys notice? You guys notice the face and the mouth and the tongue, right? Yeah, so why the mouth and the tongue?
We use the muscles to talk.
Talking? Yeah. What did you say?
eating.
Eating, yeah, eating, that's a big one, right? Like you don't want to eat something really spiky or abrasive that's going to make its way into your body, right? The eyes are big. Genitals are big. You know, those are all touch sensitive areas that are important for our survival as a species. And thus, they're the ones that get the biggest representation in our brain. So, do you guys, oh yeah, and these are kind of cool pictures. Some of the animals that I showed you before. This is their sensory homunculi. So like see these huge hairs and those huge incisors of the naked mole rat? And then that star-nosed mole, that star organ is like, you know, teeny little organ, but look how huge it is. Yeah, so you can draw, so people are really interested in, you know, what, not only how do we sense it, but how does our brain interpret it? So now we're going to do a few touch demos. We're going to really pretty briefly assess some of your guys' light touch sensitivity using von Frey filaments. And these are filaments that are used in the clinic for people like, you know, like diabetes patients or something like that who are suffering from loss of your ability to touch or to sense touch. So we'll assess some of your guys' light touch sensitivity, and then we're going to do this 2-point discrimination to try to understand those sensory fields of a few different parts of our body. And you guys are going to be doing that with each other.